The moment Emma's hands moved in silent greeting, she had no idea the simple gesture would change her life forever, or that the man watching from the doorway was about to make a decision that would shock everyone in the hospital. Emma Torres had always been invisible. At least, that's how it felt working the night shift at Metropolitan General Hospital, while other nurses commanded attention with their confident strides and booming voices. Emma preferred the quiet corners, the gentle touch, the reassuring smile that needed no words. Her shyness wasn't a weakness, it was simply who she was. And in a world that rewarded the loud, she'd learned to find peace in the shadows. That Thursday evening started like any other. The autumn rain pelted against the hospital windows as Emma checked her patient roster. Room 407, new admission. Eleanor Mitchell, 72, post-operative care. Emma gathered her supplies, took a deep breath, and pushed open the door. The woman in the bed looked small against the white sheets, her silver hair perfectly styled despite her hospital gown. But it was her eyes that caught Emma's attention, sharp, intelligent, and utterly frustrated, as she gestured emphatically at the nursing assistant who stood frozen, clipboard in hand. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Mitchell," the assistant stammered. I can't understand." Eleanor's hands moved faster, more urgently, her face flushing with the effort of trying to communicate. Emma recognized that look. She'd seen it before years ago on her younger brother's face before they'd learned to bridge the silence between them. Without thinking, Emma stepped forward. Her hands rose, fingers forming careful, deliberate shapes. "Hello, my name is Emma. I'm your nurse tonight. Are you in pain?" The change in Eleanor's face was instantaneous. Her eyes widened, then softened with such relief that Emma felt her own throat tighten. The older woman's hands flew up in response. "No pain, just frustrated. No one here understands me. My interpreter couldn't come." "I understand," Emma signed back, a gentle smile crossing her features. "Yeah, I'm here. What do you need?" For the next hour, Emma forgot about her shyness entirely. She and Eleanor communicated seamlessly, discussing medications, comfort levels, and eventually, life beyond the hospital walls. Eleanor spoke through her hands about her garden. Her love of classical music she could no longer hear but remembered in her bones. Her late husband who used to sign her love poems. Emma found herself sharing, too, about her brother Daniel, born deaf, who taught her that communication transcended sound. About how signing had become her second language, as natural as breathing. About how she'd become a nurse partly because she knew what it meant to be unheard. What Emma didn't notice was the man standing in the doorway. "There was no issue," Marcus interrupted. "There was excellence. Exceptional, compassionate care. I want to know why someone with her skills is working nights. I want to know why this hospital doesn't have a deaf services program. And I want to know how we fix that." 3 months later, Emma stood in a modern office space within Metropolitan General, still processing everything that had happened. After that conversation, things had moved with startling speed. Marcus Mitchell, the Marcus Mitchell, though she'd only learned his identity, later had funded a comprehensive deaf services program. Emma had been promoted to director. Despite her protests that she wasn't qualified, wasn't experienced enough, wasn't ready. "You're exactly right," Marcus had told her during their meeting, his eyes intense. "You're the only one who truly understands." The program had become her purpose. They'd hired interpreters, trained staff, created resources. But more than the professional changes, something else had shifted. Marcus had kept coming around. First for program meetings, then for coffee, then for walks in the hospital garden where he'd confessed that building empires felt empty compared to building connections. Emma, who'd spent her life being invisible, suddenly felt seen, truly seen, by someone who could have anyone. Now standing in her new office, Emma watched through the window as Marcus taught a group of executives basic sign language. Eleanor sat beside him, coaching, laughing at their clumsy attempts. The older woman had become Emma's fiercest advocate and, surprisingly, her friend. Emma's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Dinner tonight? My mom wants to show you her garden. And I want to tell you something important." Emma's heart fluttered. She'd learned that sometimes the quietest gestures created the loudest impact. That kindness didn't need an audience. That being herself, shy, gentle, unassuming, was exactly enough. As she typed her response, Emma thought about that rainy Thursday night when she'd simply done what felt right, never imagining it would lead here, to purpose, to family, to love blooming in the most unexpected places. Sometimes the most profound changes begin with the smallest acts of humanity. A simple greeting, a moment of understanding, hands moving in silent symphony, bridging the gap between worlds. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person watching from the doorway is exactly who you've been, waiting for all along. Marcus Mitchell had been in back-to-back meetings all day. As CEO of Mitchell Enterprises, a tech empire his father had built from nothing, his time was measured in millions per minute. But when his assistant informed him his mother had been admitted for emergency, gallbladder surgery, everything else stopped mattering. He'd rushed to the hospital, still in his tailored suit, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. But when he reached his mother's room, he froze at the threshold. There, bathed in the soft fluorescent light, was a young nurse with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her hands moving in fluid conversation with his mother. And his mother, his fierce, independent mother, who'd been struggling since losing her hearing 5 years ago, was laughing. Actually laughing, her face transformed with joy. Marcus watched, transfixed, as the nurse adjusted his mother's pillows, checked her IV, and continued their silent dialogue. There was something profoundly gentle about her movements, a kindness that seemed to radiate from her very being. When she finally noticed him, she startled, her cheeks flushing pink. "I'm so sorry," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You must be Mrs. Mitchell's son. I was just—" "That's my boy," Eleanor signed, beaming. "Marcus, this angel speaks my language," Emma translated, her eyes darting between mother and son, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. Marcus found himself staring. In his world of power plays and corporate maneuvering, genuine compassion had become rare, yet here it was, unassuming and pure. "Thank you," he said, his voice rougher than intended. "No one at this hospital has—" "Thank you." Emma nodded quickly and slipped past him, disappearing down the corridor like a ghost. But Marcus couldn't stop thinking about her. Over the next 3 days, as his mother recovered, Marcus found excuses to visit during Emma's shifts. He watched her work, how she anticipated needs before they were expressed, how she made every patient feel seen. With his mother, she was particularly attentive, bringing books in Braille she'd borrowed from the library, teaching the other nurses basic signs, advocating fiercely but quietly for accommodations. "She doesn't know who you are," his mother signed one evening, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "She has no idea she's been bringing the CEO coffee." Marcus glanced at the lukewarm cup of hospital cafeteria coffee Emma had brought him during her rounds, treating him like any other visitor. In his world, people usually knew exactly who he was. They wanted something, but Emma? She'd simply noticed he looked tired. On Eleanor's discharge day, Marcus made a decision. He requested Emma's supervisor to his mother's room. The older nurse arrived looking nervous, probably expecting a complaint. "I want to discuss Emma Torres," Marcus began. The supervisor's face fell. "Sir, if there was any issue—"